Well, today is March the 24th. It is a Wednesday, and we are continuing our chronological study of the book of Leviticus. The title of this devotional is Old Testament Sacrifices and what they teach us about God's character. Our scripture reading today is Leviticus chapter 2 and 3. And then just a personal note, be aware as you're studying about the sacrifices in Leviticus that some of them might appear to be deep, appear to almost not be applicable to where we are and how we live today. But I assure you there is a wealth of truth that you can find as we go through this study in the book of Leviticus. Now, we've introduced already in Leviticus chapter 1 the first sacrifice, which was a burnt offering. It was a sacrifice for sin, and an animal that was sacrificed that was a male without blemish, either a bull, sheep, goat, or a fowl. Well, this brings us today to another sacrifice. Leviticus 2 translate this as a law or as a meat offering. Now, a meat, the word meat can be translated meat or meal. And in this particular instance, as you're looking at Leviticus chapter 2, it becomes very obvious that what we're talking about would be a grain offering. Now, Leviticus chapter 2, the meat offering, literally the meal offering, was a non-blood sacrifice. Consisted of, in one instance, of raw grain, fine flour, oil mixed with frankincense. And this was known as an oblation offering or a gift or a present. And it was a voluntary offering which was brought to the priest. And the priest would take a portion for their families, and then the rest would be offered as a burnt offering. Now, there was a meat offering that consisted of bread baked in an oven, or cooked in a pan, or made in a frying pan. And those that were bringing this sacrifice to the tabernacle were doing so understanding that the priest would take a portion for their own households. That was God's way of meeting the needs of the Levites. Now, the meat or meal offerings were never to be offered with leaven, which is a symbol of sin in the Bible, nor of honey. My understanding of honey is that when bread is baked with honey, it will eventually spoil and sour. Now, there was also what was called the oblation of the first fruits. Now, this was a voluntary offering of faith. When a man was harvesting in his field, the very first fruits out of that field would have been, quote, the first fruit offering. And those who had faith to trust God to continue to provide would have brought of that first fruit offering the very first fruits that were harvested to the tabernacle. And it was a testimony of their faith. Now, Leviticus chapter 3, we find introduced the law of the peace offering. Now, the third offering was a sacrifice, a peace offering. It was a blood offering. Unlike the burnt offering, the peace offerings could be male or female, but the standard still was without blemished. And that applied, and the priest would have inspected the offerings to ensure that they were acceptable without blemish sacrifices. Now, there was the offering of the herd, either a bull or a heifer, or the offering of a flock, a lamb or a goat. As with the burnt offerings, the worshiper would lay his hands upon the head of his offering, kill it at the door of the tabernacle. The priest would then sprinkle the blood of the sacrifice on the altar and then burn the sacrifice on the altar itself. Now let me conclude with this. God's standard, the Lord's standard for sacrifices was without blemish. The sacrificial offerings were to be of the highest quality. And I'm sure for some then, as it is today, the temptation was to bring the Lord less than the best. But only the best would be sacrificed, accepted by the Lord. You know, the Apostle Paul had that same without blemish standard in mind when he wrote in Romans 12, 1 and 2 to believers. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, now listen, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Goes on to say, and be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. The Lord required the best in sacrifices, and He requires no less of believers today. Our lives are to be holy, acceptable unto God. Holy meaning sanctified, set apart, dedicated to the Lord. Acceptable meaning pleasing and conforming to the will of God. Listen, anything less than the best is unacceptable to the Lord. Let's give Him our best today. God bless you. Have a great day, and I appreciate you allowing me to come to you. Bye-bye.